What happens when a prince who has spent years carefully crafting his public image suddenly finds himself face to face with a host who refuses to play by the royal rules? Tonight, we dive into one of the most explosive television moments in recent memory, where Prince Harry's appearance on the Graham Norton show went from friendly banter to complete chaos in a matter of minutes. Before we get into this wild story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really pushed Harry over the edge. Trust me, you're going to want to hear every single word of this incredible showdown. The red chair was spinning. The audience was buzzing with excitement, and Graham Norton was in his element. The show had already featured a delightful cooking, a segment with a celebrity chef, and some lighthearted chats with a popular actress. The atmosphere was quintessentially Graham Norton, warm, witty, and slightly mischievous. When Prince Harry walked onto the set, the audience erupted in applause. He looked relaxed, confident, even settling into the famous red sofa with that familiar smile we have all seen countless times. Graham, ever the professional, started with the usual pleasantries. "Your Royal Highness, lovely to have you here tonight. How are you finding life these days?" The question seemed innocent enough, the kind of softball opener that talk show hosts use to ease their guests into the conversation. Harry's response was equally measured, talking about his various charitable endeavors and his focus on mental health awareness. The audience was eating it up, and for the first few minutes, everything seemed to be going exactly as planned. But anyone who knows Graham Norton understands that he rarely stays in safe territory for long. His charm lies in his ability to dig just a little deeper to find the human story beneath the polished exterior. "You know," Harry Graham said with that trademark twinkle in his eye, "I have to ask about something that has been fascinating the public lately. This whole business about stepping back from royal duties. It must have been quite the family discussion around the dinner table." The change in Harry's demeanor was subtle but noticeable. His smile became just a fraction tighter, his posture a little more rigid. "Well, Graham, as I have said before, it was a decision we made as a family, and we are all moving forward in our own ways." It was a diplomatic response, the kind of carefully crafted answer that royal media training produces. But Graham, sensing an opportunity, was not about to let it slide. Of course, Graham nodded, his tone remaining light and conversational. "But surely there must have been some interesting conversations. I mean, you do not just wake up one morning and decide to relocate to California without someone having something to say about it." The audience chuckled, appreciating Graham's gentle prodding. This was what they came for. After all, the moments when the carefully constructed public personas started to crack just a little, Harry's laugh was forced, and those paying close attention could see the tension beginning to build. "You know, Graham, family discussions are meant to stay within the family. I think most people can understand that." His voice carried a slight edge, a warning that perhaps this line of questioning was approaching uncomfortable territory. But Graham Norton did not become one of Britain's most beloved talk show hosts by backing down when things got interesting. "Absolutely. Family privacy is important," he agreed. Before adding, "With perfect timing though, I have to say, for a family that values privacy you all do seem to end up in the papers quite a lot." The audience laughed, but it was a different kind of laughter now, the kind that comes when tension is building and everyone can feel it. Harry's jaw visibly tightened. "A tired for you," he said, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. "Media has a way of twisting, of making private family matters into public spectacles." The jovial atmosphere was beginning to shift, and Graham, experienced as he was, could sense the change in the room. "Oh, absolutely," Graham said, his tone still light, but with an undertone of challenge. "Though I suppose when you go on international television to discuss those private family matters, you are sort of inviting the conversation, are you not?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and the audience fell silent, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Harry's response was immediate and sharp. "I think there is a difference between sharing your truth and having others profit from your pain," he said, his voice rising just enough to signal that his patience was wearing thin. "Some of us have had to live with the consequences of media intrusion our entire lives, and sometimes you reach a point where you have to speak up." Graham leaned forward slightly, his expression becoming more serious. "I understand that, Harry. I really do. But you have to admit there is a certain irony in complaining about media attention while simultaneously courting it. I mean, you have done interviews, documentaries, written books. You cannot really have it both ways, can you? The question hit like a lightning bolt. Harry's face flushed, and for a moment the carefully constructed royal composure completely disappeared. You know what, Graham? He said, his voice now clearly angry. I think there is a fundamental misunderstanding here about what it means to try to control your own narrative when you have spent your entire life having other people control it for you. The audience was completely silent now. The earlier laughter replaced by an almost palpable tension. Graham, to his credit, remained calm and professional, but there was a steely determination in his eyes. I think I understand perfectly well, he replied evenly. What I am trying to understand is why you expect the public to be sympathetic to your desire for privacy when you keep choosing very public forums to express your grievances. Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You know what? I think this interview is over, he said, his voice shaking with barely controlled anger. I came here thinking we could have a civilized conversation, but it seems like you are more interested in scoring points than having an actual discussion. Graham remained seated, his expression calm, but firm. Harry, I am simply asking the questions that I think the audience wants answered. If you find those questions uncomfortable, perhaps the issue is not with the questions themselves. The words were delivered with Graham's characteristic wit, but there was an underlying seriousness that made it clear this was no longer just entertainment. The studio had fallen into an eerie silence, broken only by the faint hum of the camera still rolling. Harry remained standing, his chest rising and falling with barely controlled anger. While Graham sat calmly in his chair, his hands folded in his lap. The other guests on the sofa looked like deer caught in headlights, unsure whether to intervene or simply disappear into the cushions. Sit down, Harry, Graham said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had been managing difficult situations on live television for decades. We are not finished here. There was something in his tone that was both invitation and command, and for a moment, it seemed like Harry might actually comply. Instead, Harry took a step closer to Graham's desk, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more menace than if he had shouted. You want to know what the real issue is, Graham? The real issue is that people like you think you have the right to dissect every aspect of my life, my family's life, my marriage, my children, as if we exist purely for your entertainment. Graham's eyebrows raised slightly, but his expression remained controlled. People like me, he repeated, his tone deceptively mild. You mean television presenters, or do you mean something else entirely? The question was loaded and everyone in the studio could feel the weight of it. I mean people who profit from other people's pain, Harry shot back, his voice gaining volume again. You sit here in your comfortable chair making jokes about things that have genuinely hurt real people, and you act like it is all just harmless fun, but it is not fun when you are on the receiving end of it. The audience was riveted now. This was television gold, the kind of unscripted drama that money could not buy. Graham leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. A very long time, and I have always tried to treat my guests with respect and dignity. But part of that respect includes not treating them like fragile children who cannot handle a challenging question. Challenging questions. Harry's voice cracked with incredulity. You are basically accusing me of being a hypocrite on national television. How exactly is that respectful? Graham's smile was sharp now. All pretense of geniality gone. I am not accusing you of anything, Harry. I am simply pointing out the contradictions in your public statements. If you find those contradictions uncomfortable, perhaps you should examine why that is rather than shooting the messenger. Words hit Harry like a physical blow. His face went red, and for a moment it looked like he might actually lose complete control. You know what, Graham? On being the nice guy, the safe pair of hands, the one who makes everyone feel comfortable. But here you are going for the jugular the moment you smell blood in the water. Graham stood up now, his full height matching Harry's, and suddenly the dynamic in the room shifted completely. I am not going for anyone's jugular, he said, his voice steady, but with an edge of steel. I am doing my job, which is to have interesting conversations with interesting people. If you cannot handle that level of scrutiny, then perhaps you should reconsider putting yourself in the public eye. There it is, Harry said, pointing an accusatory finger at Graham. Thinks they know, but the calculating media manipulator who will throw anyone under the bus for a good story. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. He looked genuinely angry. You want to know what is calculating, Harry? Coming on my show, accepting the platform, the audience, the publicity, and then having the audacity to lecture me about media manipulation. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot court the media when it suits you and then play the victim when it does not. I am not playing anything, Harry snapped back. I am trying to protect my family from the same kind of treatment that destroyed my mother. Family. The mention of his mother sent a visible shock wave through the studio. Graham's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. Do not bring your mother into this, Harry. That is not fair, and you know it. Your mother was a remarkable woman who faced genuine persecution from the media, but your situation is not the same, and using her memory to justify your current behavior is beneath you. Harry's face went white with rage. How dare you? He whispered, his voice trembling with fury. How dare you tell me what I can and cannot say about my own mother? You did not know her. You did not lose her. You have no right to use her name to make your point. And you have no right to use her name to avoid answering difficult questions. Graham shot back, his own voice rising now. Your mother faced real persecution, real danger, real consequences. And talk show hosts, there is a difference, and pretending otherwise diminishes what she actually went through. The studio was electric with tension now. The other guests had completely disappeared into the background. The audience was holding its collective breath and the cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of this extraordinary confrontation. Harry was shaking with rage, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. You know what, Graham? Harry said, his voice now ice cold. Behind all that charm and wit, you are just another media vulture feeding off other people's misery. Graham's smile was razor thin now. And this conversation tells everyone everything they need to know about you too. Harry, you talk about wanting to control your own narrative, but what you really want is to control everyone else's narrative. 2. You want to be able to say whatever you want, whenever you want, without anyone having the right to question it. That is not true, Harry protested. But his voice lacked conviction now. Is it not? Graham pressed. Because from where I am sitting, it looks like you are perfectly happy to discuss your family's private business when it serves your purposes. But the moment someone asks you to explain the contradictions in your position, you throw a tantrum and storm off. Harry's face was purple with rage now. I am not throwing a tantrum, he shouted, his voice echoing through the studio. I am standing up for myself and my family against people who think they can say whatever they want about us without consequences. What consequences? Graham asked, his voice deceptively calm. What exactly are you threatening here, Harry? Because it sounds like you are saying that anyone who questions you should face consequences. That sounds rather authoritarian for someone who claims to champion freedom and democracy. For a long moment, his chest heaving, his hands shaking with rage. You know what? He said finally, his voice barely controlled. I do not have to sit here and listen to this. I do not have to justify myself to you or anyone else. No, you do not, Graham agreed, settling back into his chair with an air of satisfaction. But if you leave now, if you walk out of here in a huff, everyone will know exactly what kind of person you really are. Someone who can dish it out but cannot take it. Someone who demands respect but refuses to show it to others. Prove Graham's point. The silence stretched on, becoming more uncomfortable with each passing second. The moment stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. Harry stood there, his face a mask of barely contained fury. While Graham remained seated, his expression one of calm satisfaction. The studio audience was so silent you could hear a pin drop. Everyone sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Finally, Harry broke the silence, his voice low and dangerous. You think you are so clever, do you not, Graham? You think you have backed me into a corner where I have no choice but to take your abuse or prove your point by leaving. But you have made one crucial mistake. Graham's eyebrows raised slightly, but his expression remained controlled. And what mistake is that, Harry? You assume I care what people think, Harry said, his voice gaining strength. You assume that your opinion or the opinion of your audience matters to me. But here is the thing, Graham. I have spent my entire life being judged, criticized, and analyzed by people who know nothing about my real life. And I have learned that the opinions of people like you are worth exactly nothing. Graham leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. People like me again. You keep saying that. What exactly do you mean by people like me? People who have never had to make a real sacrifice for anything. Harry shot back. People who have never had to choose between their family and their conscience. People who sit in judgment of others from the comfort of their privileged positions. Never having to face the consequences of the decisions they criticize. Graham's smile was sharp as a blade. That is rich coming from someone who was born into the ultimate privilege. You are lecturing me about sacrifice and consequences when you have never had to worry about paying rent or putting food on the table or any of the real struggles that ordinary people face every day. You think being born into the royal family is a privilege. Harry's voice was incredulous. You think having every moment of your life scrutinized, every mistake magnified, every private moment turned into public property is a privilege. You think losing your mother to media harassment is a privilege. I think having access to the best education, the best healthcare, unlimited resources, and a platform that billions of people can only dream of is a privilege, Graham replied evenly. And I think using that privilege to complain about how hard your life is while ordinary people struggle with real problems is tone-deaf at best. Harry's face went white with rage. You know what, Graham? You are exactly the kind of person who is everything wrong with the media today. You pretend to be on the side of ordinary people, but you are just another establishment figure protecting the status quo. You attack anyone who tries to challenge the system because their success threatens your comfortable position. The system. Graham's voice was mocking. Now, you mean the system that made you one of the most famous and wealthy people on the planet. The system that gave you every advantage and opportunity. That system. The system that killed my mother, Harry said, his voice breaking slightly. The system that treats people like commodities to be bought and sold. The system that you are a part of, whether you want to admit it or not. Graham stood up again, his patience clearly at an end. Your mother's death was a tragedy, Harry. A genuine tragedy that no one should have to endure. But using her death to justify your every action, to deflect from every criticism, to avoid taking responsibility for your own choices, that is not honoring her memory, that is exploiting it. The words hit Harry like a physical blow, his face contorted with rage, and for a moment it looked like he might actually strike Graham. You do not get to tell me how to honor my mother's memory, he snarled. You do not get to lecture me about responsibility when you have never had to live with the consequences of media attention destroying the people you love. And you do not get to come on my show and expect me to treat you with kid gloves just because you have had a difficult life. Graham fired back. Everyone has difficulties, Harry. Everyone has pain and loss and struggles. But most people do not have the luxury of blaming all their problems on the media while simultaneously using the media to promote their own agenda. Harry was shaking with rage now, his voice rising to a shout. My agenda is trying to protect my family from the same persecution that destroyed my mother. My agenda is trying to use my platform to help people who cannot help themselves. What exactly is wrong with that? Nothing is wrong with helping people, Graham replied, his voice calm but firm. What is wrong is the hypocrisy. You cannot spend years criticizing the royal family, airing their private business in public, profiting from tell-all interviews and books, and then complain when people ask you to explain your actions. I never asked for any of this, Harry shouted, his composure completely gone now. I never asked to be born into this family. I never asked for the media attention. I never asked for any of it. All I ever wanted was a normal life with my family, but people like you will never let that happen. Graham's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. Harry, you may not have asked for it, but you have it. And with that comes responsibility. You cannot pick and choose when you want to be a public figure and when you want to be a private citizen. You cannot profit from your royal connections while simultaneously rejecting the obligations that come with them. Watch me, Harry said, his voice cold as ice. Watch me reject every single obligation. Watch me walk away from all of it. Watch me choose my family over your expectations and your judgments and your so-called responsibilities. Then why are you here?